Welcome back to The Ethical Entrepreneur, a speaker series for business owners and entrepreneurs who want to build businesses that are a force for good in the world. I'm Marika Timmers, and today I'm speaking with Rozanne about the circular economy and how you can utilize it to build a sustainable business. Welcome, Rozanne.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure. Rozanne is researcher and circular economy expert within the Sustainable Transformation Lab of Antwerp Management School, which is based in Belgium. Last year, she was recognised as one of the Sustainable Young 100 in the Netherlands for 2020, the same year her first book was published. This book was the first official For Dummies book on the circular economy, but unfortunately for many of us, including myself, and this is embarrassing, I don't speak Dutch, it is not yet available in English. This year, Kogan and Page will publish Rozanne's second book titled Mastering the Circular Economy, which will be available in English and is co-authored by Ed Wenck, so look out for that one. Rozanne, circular economy has come up already in a number of earlier interviews, but I want to take it right back to basics for those in the audience that are maybe not 100% clear on what it's all about. So
yeah,
what's driving the need for the circular economy?
Yeah. Okay, so before we dive into the need, there are three main big reasons why we have to make the shift. But I think it's good to go a little bit into detail, maybe what a circular economy is. So I think a lot of listeners know that it's a type of economy where, just like in nature, no raw materials are lost, and that the residual product of one or the waste of one product is the food for the other. And during my lectures, I always refer back to the circle of life from The Lion King, because that's an excellent example describing what it means in nature and actually how we should do it as well in business and production and consumption. And it means a new way of working where the emphasis lies on closing material loops and introducing cycles in production and especially preventing waste. So we look at the entire useful life or the entire lifespan of a product. And in contrast to, I think, what a lot of people think or what a lot of businesses want us to think is that as a consumer, you don't have that much impact. I mean, it's very important that you as a consumer change something in your behavior as well. But if we look, for example, in the design stage in the product's life, 80% of the total environmental impact of a product occurs there. So as a business, as an entrepreneur, you really have the means to make a difference. You can make an impact if you take a critical look, for example, in your design process. You can do that by, I don't know, introducing reused materials, bio-based materials, looking at take back or buyback systems, creating, for example, from a policy perspective, more producer responsibility. And if that works, if we do that, then no raw materials are lost. We achieve or aim for a high quality of those reusable materials, no waste, and that's when we call like closing the loop. So that's why in a circular economy you talk a lot about closing the loop. But one thing before I go into answering your question, what's driving the need, I think it's very important to highlight is the social aspect of a circular economy, which is often overlooked. So we will be able to solve all the technical issues that are still occurring. We are not there yet in 100% circular economy. There are still a lot of things that need to be solved. But no matter how you look at it, we can't make this transition without people. So that social side of the circular economy, the knowledge, the skills, the awareness, the welfare, also personal development is fundamental in this transition. Because if we are transitioning to a new economic system, which it's what we're doing, then we cannot overlook that. So we have to broaden that circular economy scope and take those issues into consideration. So that's an important topic that I really want to point out, which deviates from the question. So what's driving the needs? Like I said, there are three major global reasons. The first is the impact that we are having on the climate. Second one is the growing demand for natural resources. And the third one is our dependence on other countries. And I must add here, this is spoken from maybe a very European, Western European perspective, that dependence on other countries, but that is where I'm from, that's where I operate in. So I will continue to have that.
But it's also here. The global economy these days, wherever you are.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
True. That's right. So let's go through them one by one. So first, the impact that we're having on the climate. Like you said in the beginning, I live in Antwerp, a country like Belgium. It's a tiny country. We're only 11 million people. But if we consume globally the same amount of resources like we do in Belgium, we would need 4.3 planets to sustain that each year. I mean, that's insane. 11 million people in a tiny country, 4.3 planets if we all consume like that. And it probably has already come up at the topic of Earth Overshoot Day last year that fell on August 22nd in 2020. And that's the day in the year that we have consumed more resources than the Earth can regenerate back in 1 year. So simply saying we are in debt to the Earth already halfway through the year. And that has enormous consequences on the climate. So the burden on the environment increases because we just keep getting more and more resources out of it. Our natural capital, like lakes and soils, forests, they are degraded and depleted. Biodiversity is really being damaged and lost, and it goes very, very fast. We have climate change. There is no denying in that. And then there are serious shortages of natural resources. And that is part of the second important reason why we have to switch to a new model, our growing demand for those resources. So in 2050, the world population will be around 10 billion people, and prosperity will only increase. I mean, that's a fact. The demand for primary raw materials will therefore also continue to rise, while study shows and practice shows as well that it's getting harder and harder to extract raw materials from the earth. So we will have to produce more with fewer raw materials. There is a governmental agency in Flanders. It's called Circular Flanders. That's a part of Belgium. That's a difficult topic. Let's say Circular Belgium. They have created a really good overview. It's called How Much Is Left. So I would suggest people to look that up because it really shows how long important raw materials will last. So I took a look at it before this interview. So if we go on producing and consuming the way we do now, with, for example, silver or oil or gold, they will not be available to us anymore pretty soon. And it's even before 2050. So that's in our lifetimes. So we have to change the way how we use them. And I mean, if you think about this, we take a raw material deep from the earth that took millions of years to eventually change from a microorganism to oil. And then we change this oil by means of many difficult processes and systems into another material, which we call plastic. And then we throw that away after one very short period of use to be burned or to be end up like in nature or our oceans. And that is the system that we're working in. To me, that is insane. And that is something we have to change, and we all have to change that. And then coming back to the third reason, the dependence on other countries. Like I said, I live in Western Europe, and most of our countries are dependent on other countries for raw materials. If we look at the Dutch industry, they obtain 68% of the raw materials from abroad. And a lot of the critical raw materials come from conflict areas, such as cobalt from Congo. And if we take into account the growth of the world population, the increase in the demand for these resources, that could have a really negative consequence for the stability of our economies. So as a result, there is the danger of more political tensions. We have to somehow reuse the materials that we get in our national borders. We have to reuse that in our own countries to become less dependent. So avoiding conflicts, avoiding political tensions. And we already saw this last year in the beginning of the COVID pandemic. A lot of supply chains just shut down because they couldn't get the right supplies anymore. And that is one of the conflicts that we need to avoid. And I think that was a really eye-opener for a lot of businesses. So those are, I think, the three main important reasons. And then where the circular economy comes in is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They did a really good study on global greenhouse gas emissions. And they found that by, for example, completely switching to renewable energy, we can address only 55% of greenhouse gas emission. The other 45% needs to be tackled by transforming how we design and how we make and how we use products and foods. And that the answer to that is the circular economy.
Yeah, nicely put. I have nothing to add on that one. You covered everything perfectly.
Yeah, good. There's a lot more to say, but
I'm sure. No, amazing. Thank you. So much opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So what can business owners or entrepreneurs do in their businesses to make a difference and to leverage the circular economy?
Yeah, so I can imagine that it can be quite overwhelming to start working around this topic, because like you say, there's so many opportunities, but there are also a lot of pitfalls. Sometimes the technology isn't there yet. Sometimes the legislation or policy or financial side isn't there yet. So to go from a linear supply chain or model to a circular value chain, I think it's important first to, like, very simple, the basic, look at your purpose statement, look at your strategic objectives connected to your purpose, and does that favor circularity? If not, what can you do to change that? So, for example, if you are a startup that produces goods, look at the resources you use. Look at how you deal with your inventory. Do you produce in bulk or do you produce on demand? So look into the circular economy and find the parts that are applicable to your business model or to your organization, and find KPIs that support you in your circular transition. And that is different for every company. Some are more focused, like I said, on resource management, or maybe the answer is switching to a service model, or changing your design strategies to go to a zero waste design strategy, or work without any chemicals to avoid that kind of pollution. So it is very important to start, or you really need a clear view on your existing situation. So you need to identify where you can change and where you can make a positive impact. So you need to know like the ins and the outs of your current linear value chain. And a great way to do that is using the business model canvas. It's easy. You can do it in a brainstorm session. It's fun to do. And you can identify all the building blocks of your company and in the as-is situation. But you can also imagine the desired circular situation using that model. And I think that is a really good first step to do. Because when you have these building blocks or the desired circular situation, you can imagine like the steps you need to take to get there. So do you need to focus on your physical flows, or in what kind of activities can you do to enhance that circularity? Is it a new product, or is it focused on reusing components? There are a lot of things that you can derive from that business model canvas. So I would suggest entrepreneurs to focus on that. And aside from that, a very important thing that will also come up by doing that is it's one of the first times in history, I think, that companies need to rethink their view on competition. It's not about changing one product or one material. It's about changing a whole system. And you cannot do that alone. So you have to identify in your value chain, okay, who can you collaborate with? What do I need from that stakeholder to, I don't know, to change my way of working or to achieve that KPI that I set? What do I need from them, and how can we work together to work for a better world? So that is very important. You need to collaborate to make this transition.
Yeah, I love that. And that will actually be music to yesterday's speakers' ears.
Oh, so, good.
Yesterday we spoke with Saskia from the Mind Lab here in Auckland. And yeah, she was talking all about collaboration and partnerships. So,
oh, great.
Yeah, a lot of what you've said is also aligned with what has come up for other speakers as well. In fact, one thing that Saskia mentioned yesterday was the for-purpose canvas instead of the business model canvas, which I wasn't aware of. So it was good to take a look at that as well.
It is, and there are a lot of like canvases or tools out there that can help you look at your business in that way. So to me, it doesn't really matter which canvas you use, as long as all the building blocks that you need to envision your transition are there. And I picked the basic business model canvas because that is the canvas that we use and elaborate on in my new upcoming book, like you said, with Ed Vink. So for us, we work with that one. But a great tip as well, if you want to use, for example, the general business model canvas, do a quick Google search for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation business model canvas, because they have used the exact basic one, but have some prompts and some questions in there that can help you think or imagine your circular business model canvas. And of course, we do that in the book as well, step by step. But then, I mean, the other one is a free tool on the internet.
Might put it in the email.
Yeah.
So that all sounds amazing and achievable, and loads of opportunities there. What are some of the better innovations that you've already seen delivered in this space?
Yeah. So as I think most people know, the concepts related to circular strategies all start with RE in the naming, like reuse, refurbish, recycle, and so on. And we refer to that as the R letter. So there are 10 strategies with the R. It's refuse, reduce, resell or reuse, repair, refurbish, remanufacture. Let me think. Repurpose, recycle, then we have energy recovery and remining of materials. And the first two strategies, refuse and reduce, are the prevention options. So for that, I mean, that speaks for itself. That's eliminating waste from your supply chain. That is sometimes choosing not to produce anymore. Sometimes by legislation, like we see in the European Union now, from the 1st of January this year, there is a ban on single-use plastics. And that is all to do with the strategy of refuse and reduce. And the other 8 strategies are focused on the reutilization of materials and of components. And for every strategy, you have very inspiring innovations and examples. So for example, one that I really like, and it's very creative and very, I mean, it's a creative way on finding a leftover product or a leftover material that normally gets wasted and rethinking it and reusing it in a different way. And it's a brand called Wasteboards. It's a Dutch brand. And they make skateboards out of bottle caps. They just heat the bottle caps, press them very tightly together, and they create skateboards. And I want to point out this example because sometimes people think about circular innovations or circular economy as a very difficult thing to achieve. But sometimes it can be very easy to just identify a waste material, be creative, like let that spark your imagination, and then transform that in a product that people actually use without the need of the original natural resources that are used to produce that product normally. Yeah. And another innovation part or technology part that is very important is remembering that to measure is to know. So the crossover between the digital transformation and the circular one is to me very interesting. So technologies aimed at creating transparency, analyzing movements in value change, such as the Internet of Things, blockchain, RFID tags, even like artificial intelligence. They enable the tracking of products, of materials. In the Netherlands, some companies use or work with material passports, where they identify already from the beginning, from the building stage, for example, in buildings, what kind of materials are captured in the building, what all the components are, what are the specific of that materials, and then they track that during their lifetime. So they know in, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 years when they want to demolish the building, they know exactly what kind of materials are in there and for what other purposes it can be used. So making the crossover between digital transformation and the circular one, it really, it increases insights into where products go, even into material behavior. And you can really more effectively, for example, focus on maintenance. There are tests now with household appliances where they're actually smart products and they tell you exactly when they need repairing. They tell you exactly when they are being used. And by knowing when they are being used, you as a company can start looking at as a service models, for example. Yeah, and I know a really cool example from Italy. They do that with waste bins. So the local governments, they created smart waste bins to track what the inhabitants of that city are actually wasting, what they're throwing away. And by mapping that and mapping exactly when people throw out certain parts of the trash, they could harvest materials from that waste and create new purposes for it. So to measure is to know. I think that's a very cool thing to do and then a very important one.
Yeah, amazing. And you mentioned the ban on single-use plastics in Europe, which is
Yeah,
the first region to take that stand, right?
yeah, yeah,
But I'm assuming it's only a matter of time before other areas adopt a similar approach. And
yeah.
so,
Let's hope.
for all of those businesses producing and using single-use plastics, particularly if you are distributing to Europe, that's going to be a massive barrier and an issue for you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now is the time to be moving away from that and creating an opportunity to replace some of those single-use plastics. So, what are the other barriers or legislations that we need to look out for?
Yeah. So, because it's such a broad topic, like design, sourcing, production, sales, etc., etc., there are a lot of legal questions involved. For example, around, like you say, waste laws, but also warranty periods, eco-design policies, even like tax law, like I mentioned already before, extended producer responsibilities, which is not installed everywhere, competition law. And I'm no law expert, but there are a lot of things that hinder the transition to a circular economy. So from a research perspective, we see that current legislation are just generally in support of a linear economy, even if countries have set specific targets for a circular economy. It is not in line with their legislation or with their policies. So a very important one on the global level is the current legislation around waste and the trade in secondary resources. So the moment a waste material, or let's say a secondary resource, crosses the border, it no longer has value anymore. It is a real bottleneck in the trade of waste, because you are not allowed to trade waste materials. You have to keep it in border or ship it as waste, but not as anything else with potential. So as waste is not regarded as a resource, it's unusable, it's an unwanted material. While in a circular economy, it is the input, it is the thing you want, it's gold. So that is a very difficult issue for the collection and the cross-border transportation of waste streams. And a lot of legislation around that also focuses on quantity, while in a circular economy, we focus on the quality of recycled materials. So without specific legislation around that, many possible secondary resources end up just as mixed waste streams. Because then it has a lot of quantity, but no quality anymore. And then, I mean, there are processes to separate those mixed waste streams, of course, but it's very pricey, and it really hinders the transition. But also sometimes the policy is so unclear or very fuzzy that we just don't really know what to do with it or what is right according to law. So we here in the Netherlands and Belgium, and also in the EU, we have very strict food hygiene legislation in regards to food donation or like using foods after the expiration date. But the estimated expiration date is already so fuzzy, like the labeling of the foods, that it makes us throw out so many quality food and good resources in that way, just because our legislation is fuzzy and unclear. So those are some examples that I think will maybe are applicable everywhere. And then there are some really country specific ones, for example, the legal interpretation of ownership. which can really hinder rental or lease agreements. You can have the stimulating measures that increase consumption and decrease circularity, such as lower the VAT on repairs. But we don't do that. They do I think in Sweden they do, and there is a city in Austria where they do it. We have really high taxation on labor costs, making circular activities, which are labor intensive, very expensive. So those are all mechanisms in place that make it sometimes very difficult to switch to a completely circular model.
Yeah, and that's a common theme across these interviews also, is that the legislation is always going to be delayed, and we shouldn't wait for it. We should take leadership on it, and the more people that do that, the higher the likelihood of getting those new legislations through, right?
Yeah, completely. But sometimes I really understand that if you are a startup or a company really focusing on, for example, on production, and you want to do right, like you want to do right by the earth, and you want to use reused materials or bio-based materials, then it sometimes gets really difficult because our legislation is in favor of producing as cheaply as possible with the worst materials possible.
That's right.
So the incentives have to change. It's
and the education, I think, around educating the consumer on it too.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So that's that was the focus of my first book. Like, okay, we know technology will be there, but people need to make the change as well. We have to understand why it is so important, and we as consumers, we have to know why, for example, in the Netherlands, the government wants to be completely circular in 2050. Like, if you don't know why they want to do it, like, really, all those changes, like, let me just be. Like, so education and awareness is very important. Yeah.
So we have got time for one last question, and this is one that I ask a number of my experts. If you were in the audience right now and you were embarking on a new business idea, or you already had a business but you needed to improve it, what would be the top 3 things you would prioritize?
I think I would, that's also what we do with the companies that we work with. First thing I ask them is, like, how and what will you be known in 15 years if you continue the way you're operating now? And if that answer is not to your liking, or if that answer might not resonate with circularity and sustainability, change that. Envision how you would want to be known in 50 years. What do you want to contribute? So I think that is a question that entrepreneurs should ask themselves, a very important one. And another thing that, to me, and it comes back to consumers as well, and education, is don't make claims that are not true. People really value honesty. And I think sometimes companies are afraid to be honest. They are afraid to acknowledge that they don't have all the answers. But your consumers or your stakeholders, they are getting savvier. They know more and more what's up. So they know when to call bullshit. And they're getting a nose for greenwashing. So communicate about your challenges. Keep your customers informed. Ask them for help if needed, but just be honest and don't make claims that are not true. Because I think that is going wrong a lot of times, and that doesn't build trust with consumers. Then we get fuzzy and we don't know what to do. And yeah, I think that's stay true to yourself and be honest. I think that's very important.
Yeah. And again, aligned with our ethical marketing topic.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I actually just remembered, I mentioned Saskia was yesterday. I'm getting mixed up with my days. It was the day before yesterday.
Yeah.
So many interviews.
So great. Yeah.
So before we go, tell us a little bit about your book that is in English. When is it available? Can we pre-order it? What's it all about?
Yeah. So the new book is co-written with Ed Bank, and it's called Mastering the Circular Economy. And in the book, we are taking businesses completely through the transition from a linear to a circular value chain. So we start with setting the scene, like why do we need to go switch to a circular economy, all the legislation things, what does it mean for strategy, etc., etc. So there's a lot of chapters on setting the scene and all there is to know on the circular economy. And then the second part of the book, we work together with the Blue Connection game. That's an online business simulation game where you literally work on transforming a value chain. So it's really cool. You have an online dashboard, and with all the things that you can change, which you can also in real life change in your business, you can immediately see what the impact is. So there you go from 0 to 100 circular economy, you're there, you achieved it. And it's a really good way of, by gameplay, getting familiar with the changes that you can make. But of course, in real life, you don't go from 0 to 100. We have discussed there are a lot of things or mechanisms put in place that prevent us from going there at once. So the third part consists of a lot of exercises that help you rethink your business. So I think that could be really helpful for people wanting to make the shift. We go step by step using a business model canvas and a lot of other exercises to help you envision your circular business. So I'm really excited that it's coming out soon. It will be published in May this year. And you can pre-order it on the publisher website of Kogan page, Mastering the Circular Economy, and then you'll find it.
Great. I will drop the link in for all our viewers because it sounds like a really practical but also fun tool to use to get started. Yeah. Rozanne, thank you so much for simplifying the circular economy for us today.
You're welcome.
And sharing all of your insights, and so many of them, on what works and how businesses can use it to their advantage.
Thank you. Yeah, I really hope that people get something out of this and that they really, Also, I think one thing really important to remember is it should also be fun. Like it shouldn't feel like something that you are obliged to do. It's an adventure. You have all the means there. You can use your creativity to go to a completely new model. Like how exciting is that?
It's the circle of life, right?
Yeah. So I think that's very important to remember as well. Have fun with it. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks again. And thank you for joining us again today. I hope you've taken away some ideas to inject into your business. Come back tomorrow for even more. We'll see you then.